Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our fiqh hour. Alhamdulillah, now that Sha'ban has started, for those of you who were live yesterday, you would have witnessed and experienced the announcement made following unsuccessful sightings or attempts at sightings here in the UK, up and down the country yesterday. And then we had, and also pretty much across the eastern section of the world, Australia, Fiji, and significant parts of southern and middle Africa, and even to a certain extent close towards the north. But we had positive sighting from Morocco, which has 300 and odd places where it has sighting in place. And this is using unassisted eyes. And based on that, we made a declaration yesterday. And as a consequence, the month of Sha'ban has started, alhamdulillah. So let's much of your time. Normally Sunday is a quiet day. I have found the last couple of sessions of Fiqh Hour. I was having conversations with my colleagues today with regards to in Ramadan. There was a suggestion that we reduce the number of days between now and Ramadan, but I said no, I'd prefer to just keep going as we've agreed. And what to do is whenever the questions finish or the session is looking like it's finishing, then we'll just go off air a little bit earlier. And inshallah, we're trying to, as I said, I've been working on a timetable for Ramadan. So all being well, inshallah, we should have something planned there. The thing is, you have to be a little bit flexible with the times, because obviously it's trying to put it in during the day with a few of the other commitments that I will have, inshallah. And then also post Ramadan as well. Khair, enough said. Let's pick up this first question. Assalamu alaikum. Is it permissible to get a refund from a shop if the item has not been used because another shop is selling the same item at a cheaper price? This would depend obviously on the conditions of the purchase. So if you went to purchase this item from the shop and the shopkeeper, the owner of the item, said that as long as you keep the receipt, you may be able to return the item and I will give you a full refund. And then the person put certain conditions on it that, as long as it's still in its original packaging or whatever. So as long as you meet from a Sharia side, as long as you meet the conditions for a full refund, assuming he has given, or the shop owner has given you the ability to refund, then it works quite as simply as the arrangement that you can have with the person you're purchasing it from. If, on the other hand, he has bought it by a scene, as it's sometimes referred to, or he's sold it to you on a non-refund capacity. So he says to you, please make sure that this is exactly the item that you want. So, for example, certain items like underwear and things of that nature, then there is usually, and earrings and things like that which you're using on your private body. Then there's usually a no refund policy on those kind of things. Similarly, as I found out recently, is if you're buying energy, gas or electric. There's also a non-refund policy on something like that, gas or electric. So in certain cases, there's non-refund policies. And if there are non-refund policies, or cooling off period, as it's sometimes referred to. So if there is no cooling off period or no refund policy there, then please make sure you're well aware of that. Then in that case, obviously, you will not be able to return the item. But in usual cases, 99 times out of 100, I always say, I never say 100 out of 100. 99 times out of 100, whenever you buy an item from somewhere, then there is always a refund policy. Usually entails keeping the receipt and making sure that you return with the item with the receipt, and obviously that there's nothing, you return it in the original packaging sometimes, and there's nothing missing. So other than that, that should suffice. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. What is the ruling in performing nafal etikaf in a musalla in which 5 times salah and Jummah etc. takes place? The local people have no other place to pray in the locality. This is for nafal etikaf, not a sunnah. So the question that the issue which arises there, obviously, is in the question itself. The first thing is obviously is that etikaf is masnoon with the masjid. The concept of a musalla as such did not exist as such, because there was no need to conduct 5 daily prayers anywhere else but in the masjid. So therefore, this is a more novel, a more contemporary sort of issue compared to what went on in the past. So you can pray 5 daily prayers in any place. You could pay but as soon as you're opening it up to the public, now you have to decide whether this is a masjid or a musalla. And if it is a musalla, then the problem which comes up is that there's Jummah Salah being prayed here. So that becomes a problem straight at the outset, because technically speaking, Jummah is prayed in a masjid, and it's usually referred to back in the day as the Jami' Masjid. Yani, it was a masjid that the locals would all gather into in order to pray, so that there would be an element of the community coming together. That was its purpose. So you had your local masjid on your street or in your neighborhood that people went to in the neighborhood, and then you would have one huge masjid in the town or the city that would obviously be where everybody would gather. However, as we've realized, that's proving difficult to do, especially living in non-Muslim societies, but even in Muslim societies as well, where obviously the population size is such great now that one masjid will not be able to cater for the community. And therefore, there are now numerous masjids which will hold. In fact, every masjid now has Jummah Salah. So therefore, the musalla, and the only places where I've seen, for example, places that hold Jummah Salah as well as the 5 daily prayers are in places like universities and in hospitals. So for example, in a university, they may hold Jummah Salah because the university students don't get time to go off campus in order to pray and then return. So what we found, you see, is that this whole definition of where you can hold a Jummah Salah, for example, the whole topic about can you hold a Jummah Salah in a prison? Because, even the concept of being a prisoner kind of takes away the ability to go for a Jummah Salah, really, because you're sort of locked away. But so what we've seen, you see, is the absolute strict application of the concept of upon whom is Jummah compulsory, because upon prisoners, Jummah was not compulsory, has now become somewhat sort of watered down. And that's because there's been an argument made for the greater good, or the bigger cause. And the bigger cause meaning that we live in a society where religion and religious identity is continuously under threat, being in a liberal society. And also because there's no what's the right word, there's no external structure there to promote religiousness. In fact, quite the opposite. The social structures tend to promote everything but religiousness. So therefore, there has been, and sometimes, people stay in prisons, God forbid, for like 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that would mean that they would obviously not pray Jummah Salah for a considerable length of time. So these decisions have been made. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with them as to the rationale for it, because what happens is it kind of undermines the whole fiqh structure, but it is what it is. So in that kind of whole concept, and would a person be, would it be correct to perform itikaf? For me, I would say itikaf is something which is solely dedicated to the masjid. It is that's why even when you look at the Hanafi school, which dictates for a woman to perform her itikaf in her home, it's an interesting position to adopt. Because when we look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, then we see that our blessed mothers would actually pitch up a tent in the masjid itself. So they did not perform itikaf in their homes, but obviously at that time as well, women would pray their salah in the masjid. Not every salah, but at least the daily salahs, and I mean the daylight salahs, not the daily salahs, but the daylight salahs. So in answer to that, and you're saying performing nafal itikaf. Well, I guess if you're, because this musalla is literally being treated like a masjid, the way you've described it. They're performing 5 daily prayers in it, they're performing Jummah Salah. What's left? And then you're saying the local people have no other place to pray in the locality. So in essence, it's become pretty much like a masjid without being a masjid. So a nafal itikaf does not carry the same kind of ahkam that obviously sunnah itikaf does. So a person should make a habit, if he's making the dua when he's leaving the masjid, and he's making the dua al-maftah li abwab rahmatik as he's entering the masjid, then in a way he's starting to treat it like a masjid, even if the hukm of masjid is not legally applied to it. So then if he's performing nafal itikaf and he says as he goes in, nawaitu al-itikaf ma dumtu fil masjid, again ma dumtu fil masjid being a key word there, then inshallah we would hope that this person is included within that nafal itikaf. But obviously it's problematic. Somebody did raise a question a week or 2 weeks ago, that because, especially living as a minority now in places like the UK and things like that, should we continuously be finding masjids and establishing masjids as our communities grow out of their normal places that they used to live? So for example, here in Bradford, obviously Muslims used to live pretty much in the inner city, in the BD1s, in the BD3s, in the BD7s, the BD5s, and now obviously they're moving out to the BD13s, BD11s, and they're going further and further out of Bradford because obviously the population is increasing and there's obviously limited housing. So, and because people move into that area, then obviously they need a masjid, they need somewhere to pray, they need somewhere to pray their Jummah, they need somewhere to send their children in order to learn the basics of Islam. So they establish a masjid. But what's also happening is because now there are so many masajids, you're finding that, apart from maybe Jummah Salah, the masjid is pretty much empty outside of Jummah Salah. So you find, for example, for the 5 daily prayers, it's pretty empty. The masjid is quite lucky if it has a saf or maybe even 2 safs for its salahs, especially the ones, the morning ones. Maybe Isha might have some more people in it, especially this time of the year. But any other salah, the numbers are quite few. And there's every masjid, unfortunately, because it's not structured in financially in the appropriate way, is still working on donations. There's no wakf, for example, or awqaf associated with a masjid, when really, the masjid committee members should be thinking a little bit outside the box, and they should be establishing awqaf, and the awqaf should then be funding the masjid. It's somewhat slightly perplexing that we've been established in the UK now approaching nearly 80 years, at least 70 years, and we're still, each of our masjid is surviving on donations. 70 years later, you would have thought that by now we would have some kind of, I know we all work independently, that's just the way our nature of the beast, but we would have had some kind of, each masjid committee would have structured their masjid in such a way whereby the awqaf are now funding the masjid, so that there are rent being collected from shops, or rent being collected from housing is a revenue for the masjid to continuously run. But it's the short-sightedness that we have, and also the absence of ulama on our committees, which causes this short-sightedness. As I said, it's somewhat perplexing that we've been in this country since the 50s, and we're now approaching the 30s, so nearly 70 years. And every Jummah, and the masjid I go to or other masjids I've been to, there's always appeal to the community again for money for extension, or money for some roof work or solar panels or heating or whatever. And yet, as I said, we're getting more and more masajids now. At the moment there is still an eagerness within the Muslim community to put their hands in their pockets and give, but that is reducing as time goes on, and also the religiousness of society is changing. There was a different element because many of the forefathers had founded these masajids, so they felt a personal obligation to maintain these masjids and keep them running. But as the communities grow and society slowly starts to now become more separated from the masjid and growing independent from the masjid, and now obviously even from the madrasa system, where you can now get online teachers, and so therefore children aren't necessarily going to the maktab either, which, you know, the maktabs haven't helped themselves, but also the community hasn't helped the maktabs in establish. So, you know, with all these things in mind, you know, each masjid, so therefore, you know, is there a need for more masajids, or is there a need for musallas? So if then the community no longer has a need for that place of prayer, then at least you can sort of stop that musalla, so to speak, without, you know, because a masjid, you can't, once you have said that this piece of land is a masjid, it will stay as a masjid until eternity. And that's why, if you look at the old books of fiqh, you never established a masjid in Darul Kufr or Darul Harb, because, you know, there was no Jummah Salah, for that very reason, because you could not determine the longevity of the establishment of Islam in a foreign country when the state is not in favor of it or not supporting it. Whereas if you're in a Muslim country, then you wouldn't even need to establish a masjid, because the state would be supporting in the establishments of masjids, or at least the local government would be. So, you know, it's a long kind of a answer, but I just, you know, it's good to get people thinking like that, especially if there's, you know, future young people, mashallah. Well, not future young people now who will be the future community, to be kind of considerate of these things. Assalamu alaikum. Any recommended books on Seerah in English? Jazakallah khair. As I said to you before, Farah, I don't read much in English. That doesn't mean that I don't read much. That didn't come out right. Most of the reading I do, you see, is in Arabic. So therefore, you know, in Islamic books anyway. So therefore, I can't really, you know, and all the books that I brought home with me are in Arabic. So, you know, I was just looking at this book here, which is Nazratun Naim. And it's a mawsu'a, it's an encyclopedia, and one of the first sections in it is upon a Siratun Nabawiyya. Well, it's in Arabic, you see, so it's of no use to people who can't speak Arabic. So I have to always look across my shelves to see how do I have anything in English. But I don't normally bring English Sirah books home. I tend to bring books, more technical books that I use to either research or answer questions with. So I can't, you know, I can't really help you there. The Sealed Nectar rings a bell somewhere, so maybe that's a good one to read. But if there is, this is me delving into my brain from years ago, decades ago. No, I don't have any English. The only English books I have are all sort of reference books. So I can't really help you there. But the Sealed Nectar rings a bell. What is awqaf? Okay, awqaf is the plural of waqf, and waqf is an underutilized financial instrument here in the UK. So, for example, let's just say, I'll give a very simplified version. So let's just say that I have some money and I want to invest that money into some kind of investment. So I invest that money, and when I invest that money, and I'm going to invest it in real estate. Okay, so I invest that money into real estate, and I want to leave this as I want to make this into a waqf. And I say that the fruit of this, i.e. the produce of this, will be spent on my children whilst they're alive. And when my children die, I don't care too much about my grandchildren, but when my children die, then I want it to go to be used for orphans. Okay. Or I might say, 30% of it is for orphans and 70% is for my children or my grandchildren or my great grandchildren or whatever still, all the way down. Now, so therefore this becomes a waqf. Now, a waqf means that the original amount of money that I put aside, which was invested, will not be touched. That will always be there. Whereas the money which comes from it, the rent money, for example, that will be used for my children and for philanthropical needs. So we had, for example, Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, who was prior to that, the Prophet ﷺ was keen for somebody to take ownership of a particular well in Medina. One particular chap owned this well. He was a non-Muslim, and he would charge at quite a high rate when he would sell water to the public. And this was causing a bit of a problem for Muslims in particular. So the Prophet ﷺ asked that if would anybody take ownership of this, it would help the Ummah. So Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan did that. And when he did that, he became the owner of this well, and he would give that free to the Muslims, to the believers. Well, that well eventually is now worth billions, because from that, there's now a hotel in Medina, Funduk Uthman ibn Affan, which is from his wakf. There is a bank account still in Uthman ibn Affan name in Medina, in which all the money that well generates, because it is used to feed date palm trees, which produce dates, which are then sold, which generate more money, and then it kind of so he is a multi-millionaire, multi-billionaire probably by now, Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan, and he continues to get that reward 1400 years later. So it's an instrument which isn't really used that much by Muslims. So, for example, if I was running a masjid and, I would say to certain brothers that, why don't you make a wakf in the local area? And they would say, what do you mean? I would say, look, you can purchase real estate and then have, 50% going to your family and 50% going to the masjid. So they can buy a shop, say, and the rent from the shop is £1,000 a month or £2,000 a month. Then from that £2,000 a month, £1,000 goes to the masjid. So there you go. Now for as long as that shop runs, £1,000 is coming into the masjid for every month. Now imagine there's 5 shops like that. That's £5,000 coming in. Now a masjid does not need to ask collection of anybody ever again, because that's more than enough money. Covers the gas, covers the electric, covers any potential renovations, whatever. And it makes the masjid completely independent from the community, in the sense that, one is, the community doesn't have to always, the community can still give if it wishes to give, but it doesn't put this difficulty upon the community. And it doesn't put the masjid in jeopardy, because donations, you don't know whether they're going to come or whether they're not going to come. If Abdullah has already prayed his Isha Salah in Jama'at or at home, and he happens to be in a masjid and the Isha Jama'at Salah is being performed, should he join the Jama'at even though he has prayed it? Is it allowed for him to join, or should he sit aside any ruling on not joining or joining? So if he's already prayed his Isha, then he's already prayed his Witr, and he's prayed this in Jama'at, then, there's no need for him to join it again, because of the fact that he's already prayed his Salah in Jama'at. It can be considered as a nafil, because we can still pray nafil after our Isha. On the other hand, if the person has prayed at home, then yes, he should join it, because he can make his Salah more powerful in that sense. It is wrong to just sit aside, because of the very reason that people will get a little bit confused as to what's going on here. Why is this brother not praying Salah? If he was a sister, he'd get away with it, because they might think he's menstruating or something like that, but then she shouldn't have been in the masjid anyway. But you get my point. However, when it comes to a chap, it's more appropriate that he's either not there, or physically that he shouldn't be in a masjid at the time he's already prayed somewhere else, or he should join and pray. Is it similar to endowments, or the close? Yeah, it's as close as you can get is to endowments. Absolutely correct. But they're not utilized at all, so you don't find that many people know about them and then necessarily utilize them as well. You see, one of the other things is that you can also use your last third, not your last third, your third, your wasiyah, to make a wakf. Many people in their wasiyah will say, oh, and give a third of my wealth in the path of Allah. I want you to go, how much is a third of my wealth? And they say, well, you're worth £300,000 at the moment, brother. So he says, okay, that's £100,000. Yes. Okay, out of the £100,000, give half to my local masjid and give half to orphans in Gambia. Okay, that's fine. He's far better off doing is taking that 100 grand and saying, construct this into a wakf. And then from its fruit, dedicate half to my local masjid and dedicate half to the orphans in Gambia. So now they will invest that £100,000 in whatever they wish to invest it in, because there will always be a wakf looking after it. Somebody would look after the wakf. Somebody who takes responsibility for the wakf. And what they would do is then they would invest that £100,000, and let's just say even if it produces it's in a good investment and it produces around 10% per year, then out of that 100 grand is making 10 grand every year. And if he's making 10 grand every year, 5 grand is going to the masjid and 5 grand is going to the orphans in Gambia. Now, if he just gave a 50 grand to his local masjid and 50 grand to the orphans in Gambia, then that's all he would do. And after that, it would cease. But if he sets a wakf up, then let's just say Yom Al-Qiyamah does not come for another 100 years. And he's making, and he doesn't make any more than 10 grand, even though we know he'll make more as time goes on. But let's just fix it at 10 grand a year. Then 5 times 100 is a lot more money, isn't it? He will actually give more money to his local masjid, and he will actually give more money to the orphans in Gambia if he makes his wasiyah into a waqf and then split the fruit between those two things. But because people aren't really that au fait with them and that confident with them, they don't really utilize these vehicles. And even our religious institutes don't really utilize these vehicles. I've seen some masjids do it. There was one masjid I went to in Birmingham. I think it was the main masjid in Birmingham, and they owned a series of shops just next to them. So they purchased them. I think they either purchased them at the same time of the masjid, and they did not convert that to a masjid. And what they did was they converted that to shops, and then the rent that was coming from there was running the masjid. So they didn't even need to collect any money of any people in the masjid. But people still gave in the masjid because, alhamdulillah, it's some people's habit to give someone in the masjid, but they were never under pressure. That became a bonus rather than they literally survived hand to mouth. And that's what you're finding in a lot of masjids. Not the ones that have been established for 30, 40 years, but what you're getting in a lot of masjids is that they're literally surviving from hand to mouth. And that's not really a good way to run an institute. If there is a disagreement within the management of a Muslim institution, what role should the layperson have? Well, it depends what the layperson is. If the layperson is a member of the masjid, because most masjids are run based on committees, so there will be a committee. There will obviously be a governing document. It might be a registered charity. So there will be a governing document that exists as well. Masjids tend not to be, or Muslim institutes tend not to be one-man bands, even though they're run like one-man bands. But for legal purposes, they will be structured, in a certain way. They will have to be, because you will struggle to collect donations if you're not like a charitable organization. And if you're a non-for-profit, then even then you will need a constitution. You'll need a governing document. You will have a bank account that will be called a business bank account. It won't be a personal bank account. And you will have to, and if you're registered with a charity commission, then there's even more regulations. So in that constitution, there will be a method to resolve conflict, or to resolve disagreements, or to resolve when there's there's no kind of system to solve the problem. And that is what is supposed to be used. It is, and I assume from the layperson you're referring to the person who's the muqtadi, the person who uses the masjid. Then remember, and I've repeated this several times over the month the masjid is a community institution. We don't live in a country in which the masjids are established by the state. Masjids in this country, UK, and in Europe, and in States, and anyway, are public institutions, meaning they are set up by the community. Unless somebody's going to come in very wealthy and literally just put his money down and set a masjid up, which is very rare, it is the community that establishes it. Therefore, it is important that as a community, it's our responsibility that the masjid runs well. Okay, it's our responsibility that the masjid runs well. It is not, we keep saying, we always look at the masjid as though it's some kind of separate entity from us. The masjid is one, it's in our community. It's been established by a community. The committee members should be from our community. Our community are responsible for the quality of education in that masjid. our community are responsible for the quality of lectures and the services that masjid offers. So if we're not happy with what the services that masjid offers, then we need to understand what the issue is. So whoever is responsible for managing it, we will raise that. Look, there are no services here for young people. There are no services here for women. There are no services here for teenagers. There's no services here for during weekends. There's no services here for Ramadan or whatever, And once they raise that issue, then it is for the masjid committee to respond, not poor Imam Sahib, because poor Imam Sahib is the visual, the manifestation, and everyone assumes, he's running the masjid. He's not running the masjid. Most likely, he's an employee. So, he can stand there, poor lad, and he can take it on the chin, but there's very little he can do. So one has to understand what the instruments of power are and how those constitutions operate, and then use those constitutions rather than, causing anarchy or anything like that. Use those constitutions to raise their concerns. So you said we're only allowed to eat fish. So I assume this includes animals such as whales, sharks, and other sea animals that are fish, but does not include animals such as prawn, crab, shrimps, and seals. Yes, that would be correct. Okay. Anything that would be considered as a fish. Harris, you really like your fish, mashallah. This, I think, the third or fourth follow-up question to fish that you've had. Are you a keen fish fella? Okay. Do you have more fish? Do you just restrict your fish to Fishy Fridays? Or do you have fish like 2-3 times a week? Because I can see this is really hit on a personal note with you. And in fact, I think what you do is every day you come back with a fish question, mashallah. But yeah, that's just about sums it, Harris. Hopefully that's done. Salam, is it sinful, not recommended, to fill up the bath to relax the muscles after a long day at work? Just if I explain the kind of concept behind it, which may be the reason why you're mentioning that, is that when a person removes garments to uncover his aura, okay, then obviously so if a man, for example, is completely naked when he gets into a bath, the problem then happens is his nakedness. And even though he's only there, then we all obviously accept that Allah is all-seeing. So therefore, you're not actually in khalwa. You're not literally all alone. There is always the presence and the observation by Allah. So therefore, what I would suggest, if a person has had a long day at work or been to the gym or whatever, and he's hurting a little bit, is to put some Bermuda shorts on, which cover from the navel to the knee, and then just get in the bath and relax. Because in that way, he's covering his aura, and therefore it's a bit like swimming. It's a bit like working out at the gym, or it's a bit like sitting in a sauna. As long as his aura is covered, then there's no harm in it. Really, it's the issue that comes is the complete nakedness. So when a person takes a shower, you should limit the amount of time that he's completely naked when he's having a shower. So that's why I guess there's that element of sinfulness or the question of sinfulness in your question. Hope that makes sense. I can never get the chance to ask follow-up questions. Also, it's common to go to a relative house and it's filled with prawns, so I'm educating these people. There might be Shafis, Hadis, so they'll just say to you, nah, you can't eat it, but we can, sort of thing. I know with regards to prawns, there's been a softening amongst the Hanafi ulama with regards to prawns, because as you're alluding to in your comment there, it is quite common. It's quite widespread. So there seems to be a softening of the position with regards to prawns compared to the other stuff like shrimps and seals and crabs and mussels and all these other squidgy things that people eat from the fish, from the sea. So, as I said, there is that softening with regards to prawns. I've not seen that towards any of the other things that you've mentioned, but there is a kind of a more blurred vision now for the Hanafi ulama with regards to shrimp. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi. Iman, how are you doing? You okay? I read shrimp and prawn are from I can't see it because they've got this little emoji of a heart under there. So I don't know how to I read shrimp and prawn. I just can't see what it says after from the something family, because they've got the little emoji there. You know those little emojis? So maybe when somebody types another question, it'll push your question up. I'll be able to read it. There you go. Yeah. Nice one, Harry. I can see it now. Yeah, there you go. You see, okay. Slug family. Yeah, that's it. You see. And we can't eat slugs. This is the whole point. You see, this is the whole thing. That we're not allowed to consume things of this nature. For that very reason, that's why the Hanafis are quite strict on it. But like I said, I've seen amongst contemporary ulama a softening of a position amongst the Hanafis as well with regards to prawn. But stick to your haddocks and your cod and your salmon and whatever else you eat. Walaikum salam, Mufsab. Is it permissible to have a German Shepherd as a guard dog? Yeah, we don't have anything against Germans and we don't have anything against shepherds. So if it's a guard dog, that's the issue, that you're using it as a guard dog. And there is some permissibility to use a dog as a guard dog, especially if it's some kind of you own a scrapyard or something like that, or you own an area which requires something to move around in it because it's quite an open space. I don't see the logic when people say, "Oh, I've got a guard dog for my house," because what can a guard dog do? Because if your guard dog is in your back garden, then someone can break in through your front garden. And if your guard dog is in your front garden, then someone can break in from your back garden. Now, unless you live in a mansion and you have gardens all the way around your house, which I don't think many people do, then I cannot see the argument that's being made for a guard dog for protecting a house. I think you're far better off having cameras, CCTV, having an intruder alarm, and things like that. So the argument, I believe, especially because if you look at the narrations, it speaks quite negatively against the dog in particular. It's only second to the pig, and that's saying something. So I cannot see the justification that's made for a guard dog. Now again, if you own a farm, you own wild animals, sheep, and you get attacked by foxes and even wolves and things like that, that's a different thing altogether. I'm talking here living in inner city, Birmingham, Bradford, Blackburn, Bolton, whatever. We don't have some of us keep sheep in our basements, but most of us don't have sheep, so there's going to be no reason to protect apart from protecting the house. So I said I can't see really the justification for a guard dog, as much as it was made back in the day. It's not so much an argument that can be made for us here in the UK. Second question. I like the way you number your questions, mashallah. Does that mean there's a third one? If someone has loans or credit card bills from the bank and dies, whilst that debt is unpaid, the banks or financiers by UK law agree to write off the debt. This is established in the contract by UK law. So if someone died, do we wait until we have gotten confirmation of that debt being cleared, or can we bury the deceased knowing that debt will be definitely cleared? Well, you would still bury the person. I don't understand why we're waiting not to bury the person. We should bury the person. This is more a case of settling his debts or her debts. So there's no need to keep the body, waiting, because once the person dies and you want the person's debts clearing, you have to get the death certificate. You would then have to share the death certificate with the banks and financiers that have given this person a loan. That will take due process. So it could be a month, 2 months, 3 months after the person has died before the state recognizes that this person is dead. Their bank accounts are closed, their debts are cleared, and all the rest of it. So no, the person should not be left kind of lying around, just hoping that we're not going to do anything until the debt's clear. We even know, for example, that a person's from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that a person's janazah was going to be prayed, and yet there was a debt on him, and that's when the Prophet ﷺ refused and said somebody else should pray over them until a Sahabi took responsibility for the person's debt. So no, I don't think we should be waiting for anybody with regards to their debt. We should bury them, so let them let their next stage of their life start. And then obviously we should look into making sure that this person's debt is clear. And this is why, debts shouldn't be taken. I know we live now in a society where living on credit is the big thing. But, credit, one shouldn't live on credit, the generation which came before us, when I say us, I mean me, the generation which came before me, very hardly ever borrowed unless they borrowed of close family friends. They would, borrowing was like something you just didn't do. But it's become such a common thing now, living on credit cards, just buy now, pay later, buy now, forget about it. I was just reading something literally this afternoon, in which somebody had a debt, they paid it off, and their credit rating went down. So instead of their credit rating going up because they've just cleared a debt, their credit rating went down. Why? Because the system wants you to be in debt. The system is only making money when you're in debt. It stops making money when you come out of debt. So, you have to kind of think about these things, that why we, and a couple of sessions ago, I mentioned, you finish your school, you finish your college, and then straight away you got to go to uni so that you get into debt. Then you finish your uni, and then you got to get a house, and then you get into debt. So by the time you're hitting 26, 27 years old, and then you get married and you have to have a big bash. So that's another debt. So by the time you're hitting 28, 29 years old, you owe like 30, 40 grand you owe 30, 40 grand on a wedding. You owe 60, 70 grand for a uni, and you owe 200 grand on a house. So you ended up owing over 300 grand, and you're 30 years old. Now, for the next 30 years, 35 years of your life, you're going to be paying that off. So as you just stay in the system, as soon as you get out of the system, you're already nearly 70. You're close to death. Your life's gone. It's something that we have to consider. I've answered that question, platinum detailing. You asked the same question again. Did you not get it? Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm a big fan of Fiqhour. Alhamdulillah. That's excellent to hear, Talha. Allow me to ask a question. Bismillah. Is there any halal way of trading in crypto? I badly need money. Nobody gives me a loan, so I have only way. There's many ways to trade, Talha. There's many ways to trade. The Sharia has given us so many ways to make money, and then it's forbidden certain ways to make money. Crypto is an area. Is it? Okay. So just for platinum, if you do hear it, then please do let me know. So the answer is that as long as a person covers their aura, okay, as long as a person covers their aura, then they may rest in a bath and relax. Okay, but they just need to it's just like going swimming, or it's like sitting in the sauna. Okay, so let me know if you've got that. If not, then you'll have to watch the YouTube when it goes live straight after 8 o'clock. It will go live, inshallah. So then you can watch that. But let me know if you've got that now. So yeah, so there's so many ways that a person can make money in that way. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Also, excellent platinum detailing. Also, in regards to that credit debt, even though the UK law and the financiers agree to write off the debt, what is the Sharia view on this? Well, the Sharia view on it is exactly what the view is on the debt. So, for example, it's like, for instance, if your good self, Abu Abdurrahman, is in debt to me, and if I say that, okay, if you pass away, then your debt is clear. You have nothing to pay to me. So that's the same way. So we take people on their arrangements. So if a person borrows some money from somebody, and that person says to them that the debt is waived if you die, a bit like student loans, that the debt is waived if you die, then the debt will be waived when they die. Okay. And we take it literally upon that agreement. I mean, Ustadji, platinum detailing. I wonder who you are. Platinum detailing. I just need to get a fancy car now, and then you can detail my car. Is that what platinum detailing is? Should there be a long-term solution to the shortage of Muslim burial spaces? It would be interesting to hear suggestions on the subject area. Yes, it's a very interesting point, Junaid. I have worked with Eternal Gardens in London, Sidcup. I think it's South London, which we've tackled points just like this, because as you can imagine, London, there is always a shortage of space. So we developed, in fact, I wrote a detailed fatwa on this. which you should be able to possibly find online, in which we looked at developing a space of a grave in which it could be used for two bodies. So there were two cavities inside the space of a grave, one on this side and one on this side. And this grave would not be affected by this grave. There would be two separate graves. And we did a long bit of work over 2 years, a lot of research, used mannequins, put the mannequins in the grave, weighing with measuring with measuring tape, data being collected, lots of things we did, alhamdulillah, over a long period of time. And we found a solution. And that solution does work. And I know, for example, that certain organizations in Wales have been in touch as well, looking at this, exploring this. So there are viable solutions to it. Can't we bury people in compartments with a barrier between each grave? That's exactly what it is, Abu Abdurrahman. I know in Saudi Arabia, they do something very similar, that they have like kind of like compartments in a grave. And the bodies are buried in there. So yes, there's no doubt that you have no choice. Land is becoming very scarce, and especially nobody wants to drive like half an hour out to bury their dead and then come back half an hour. People want it in the community as well. That's why nowadays, you do a lot. You see a lot of janazas taking place in masjids, even though, for example, the janaza should actually not take place in a masjid. But because people just can't travel that far, especially the elderly, then what they do is, in order to circumvent the issue, is they will take the body outside of the masjid and they'll form a saf or two outside of the masjid, and then the rest of the congregation will be inside the masjid. So they'll make sure that the issue is avoided. But the reason why that's done is because people just can't travel 15-20 minutes to go to the local cemetery. Now, if that's 15-20 minutes, imagine, obviously there's no space for housing nowadays, never mind graveyards. So, and we're losing all our green spaces, all our parks are disappearing. When I was a lad, there was so much demolished houses and so much space everywhere. You could play anywhere and everywhere. And nowadays, there's hardly any green spaces, because as soon as there's a little bit of green space, somebody buys it, builds a house on it. Or somebody else, some housing corporation buys it and builds house on it, because there's so much need for housing. So yeah, there is we have to be a little bit more ingenious, but we also have to be a little bit careful, because we live in a very commercial world. So what happens is, what something is a darura, something is a necessity, suddenly becomes the norm. Councils pick up on the idea, okay, why don't we just do this for Muslims, bury them like this and everything's all right. We only want to look at that and explore that, when there is a need to do so. As in, stack 7 deceased bodies in the same single graveland. Stacking 7 might be a little bit difficult, because obviously the earth is in the UK, generally speaking, is very wet. And because it's very wet, it collapses very easily. And now, unless you build a structure inside the grave, which you're solidifying it, then which defeats the object, obviously. And also doing that inside a grave is not easy. I don't know if you've ever been involved in digging graves, but digging graves is not as easy as it sounds. It needs to be done carefully and safely, because otherwise there's going to be the earth sort of swallowing down. So you can get away with 2 levels at best. You cannot get away with more than 2 levels. So the way we designed it was, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. Is the way we designed it was, so for example, I'll show it to this screen first. So that those 2 things you can see is the head. I'll just put like shoulders to the side of it. Shoulders to the side. So that's like the head and the shoulders on the side. And those 2 things, those lines that I've just made little lines through it, those were either planks of wood that was placed on top, and obviously soil is placed on top of there. I don't know well you can see it. So that fatwa exists. It's something. So if you go to Eternal Gardens website, which surprisingly is Eternal Gardens something.co.uk or something like that, Muslim cemetery in Sidcup. You'll find that inshallah there. As I said, I did have some copies of it somewhere around here. Let me see. Yes, here it is. So this was so it's out now in a nice glossy thingamajig, and it explains it in absolute great detail. So you've got, nearly 60 pages, including appendix in there. It gives you introduction, acknowledgements, framework and considerations, and then obviously outcomes of the review process. And there's that image I was showing you. That was model 2. So we came up with a few designs because they can use different designs. Model 3. And model 4. But the one I showed you is the one which was my preferred one. But I needed to give them other options because of the fact that, and then obviously the final verdict. Again, we had a little bit of the framework, and then all the references. Okay, so all the references that I took from the books of fiqh, and that's all in there. And then there's our Markaz al-Ifta, original istifta, which came in, and my original fatwa. And there we have it. So this, you might find a PDF of this online somewhere, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, inshallah. I will read it. How does one avoid nazar, and when being complimented is saying mashallah sufficient? It's very difficult to avoid nazar. I guess one avoids showing off. One avoids, drawing too much attention to themselves. One tries to keep a low profile. And the best thing to say is Tabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqeen al-mubarak fi. I wouldn't say saying mashallah, because mashallah means whatever Allah wills. So it's Tabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqeen al-mubarak fi. That is the dua. You can play this back again afterwards. It's at 1955. So it's the last 5 minutes. Tabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqeen al-mubarak fi. So whenever you see somebody that is something which is going to be of nazar, so your daughter, your son finishes Quran, something, then Tabarakallah ahsanul khaliqeen al-mubarak fi. And that should protect the person from nazar, inshallah. Let's just jump on here. If the UK imposes military subscription as is currently being discussed, what will be the ruling for Muslims? Muslims can join non-Muslims, especially those who are of the same country, in defending their country against an enemy. Absolutely. Muslims can also join non-Muslims in taking an offensive war if there is a threat against their community. However, if a Muslim feels that this is an unjust war, like we saw going on in Iraq, like we saw going on in Afghanistan and places like that, where it's an unjust war, then a Muslim can refuse to be conscripted. So they can just be, there is a phrase for it. It was used during the Vietnam War. Oh, it's there, but I can't bring it here. A conscientious objector or something like that. There's a phrase which I've now gone out my head, but hopefully somebody will think of it and put it up, in which you can, due to your conscience or your religion, refrain from joining the war. Now, whether that is a conscientious object, yeah, that's what I thought it was. So there is a legal system for which you can. Now, unless the country makes it illegal, for unless the country makes it illegal for you to be a conscientious objector, that's a different thing altogether. Okay, now you have no choice. Now it's illegal for you to do that. Now you'd have to say is, okay, how do I go about no longer being a citizen of this country? So if your country, the country that you are a citizen of, brings in a law which you don't agree with and you feel you cannot comply with and you don't necessarily want to go to prison for, then you will have to find a way to no longer being a citizen of that country. So you would have to see what the process is to become stateless unless you have citizenship of another country. If you have citizenship of another country, then you would say, okay, I wish to revoke my citizenship of this country, and I want to now become a Canadian citizen or an American citizen or a German citizen or a Dutch citizen or a French citizen or a Pakistani citizen or whatever else you want to do. But obviously, you'll need to get that ball rolling because that might take some time to happen. But you cannot break the law. That's the different thing. Or if you do break the law, then obviously you have to suffer the consequences of breaking the law. Assalamu alaikum. I heard your response on consuming prawns. However, please clarify, is there any sin for consuming the same? For consuming the same? What does that mean? Assalamu alaikum. I heard your response on consuming prawns. However, please clarify, is there any sin for consuming the same? I don't understand that. If you could just clarify what that means, then I will be able to answer, inshallah. What is the ruling about asking for worldly things in sujood outside of salah in English? I'm not aware that it is an appropriate place to ask Allah for things in sajda. Sajda is a place of worship. It is a place of glorifying Allah. Therefore, it is not necessarily the correct qibla for making dua. The correct qibla for making dua is to the sky, isn't it? That's why when we open our hands up for dua, our palms are facing the sky. When we make takbir tahrima, the qibla is in front of us, so our palms are facing in front. But when we make dua, our palms are facing the heavens, so the qibla is the heavens. So it's not appropriate to be in sajda when you're prostrating to the towards the qibla to then be making dua. So it's not appropriate. Yeah, because the thing is, as a Hanafi, okay, first of all, you have to understand the Hanafi school. Once you understand the Hanafi school and know the Hanafi's position that prawns are not considered as fish and they are makruh tahrim in some cases, then it's best to avoid them. It's best to avoid them. Because according to that school's interpretation, it is not something that we've been given permissibility to consume. So that's the understanding to take from there. So Muslims can join the British Army, but just avoid to take part in unjust wars. Yeah, Muslims can join the British Army. Otherwise, we would be a fifth column in this country. We won't live in this country. This is an area which people don't really understand and flesh out properly. So, for example, let's just we know that Pakistan and India sometimes square off with each other, but that there are Muslims in the Indian army and there are non-Muslims in the Pakistani army. So we don't kind of like think for more than 10 seconds. So the world is a gray place. That world where all the Muslims lived here and all the non-Muslims lived here and they threw stones at each other. That world is gone. Okay, that world hasn't existed for a long time. For a long time. So you've got, for example, Muslims in the Indian army, and you've got non-Muslims in the Pakistani army. So who, are those Muslims fighting in the Indian army doing something wrong? Well, no, if it's a war based on land, or a war based on water, or a war based on resources. Okay, similarly, which again is a very contentious point, but I'm just making this point so that people understand, there are Muslims in the Israeli army, and there are non-Muslims in the Palestinian resistance. So the world is, we've got to stop thinking, and this, we're not that simple and naive to think that the world is a black and white place. The world hasn't been a black and white place for a long time. Okay, the world is a gray place. I don't mean that in the weather. I mean it's gray. There are so many nuances and so many differences that we just got to be a little bit alert to, and not just be so blinded and simpletons in understanding that the world around us. Jazakallah, I agree, and not much clarification. No, there isn't, because it's a contentious point, Abu Abdurrahman. And when something is a contentious point, the problem we have is we just ignore it. But that's not the way we need to move forward. In fact, Abu Abdurrahman is a book which I've mentioned to you previously. It's a book that I wrote on Muslims in non-Muslim lands, and I talk about that, joining armies and things like that in here from a fiqh perspective, so that people understand it. Like there were some Muslims that continued to stay in Mecca even after Hijrah was done. Okay, even after Hijrah, there were some Muslims who stayed in Mecca and did not come to Medina. So what is the hukum on them? Are they Muslims? Of course they're Muslims. So, we just need to kind of understand the dynamics of how the world is and how it works and how we now are living everywhere. Whereas we weren't maybe 100 years ago, or maybe even 120 years ago, but now we are. So, and you're finding that when I did my work nearly 10 years ago, that around 45% of Muslims are now living as a minority. 45% of Muslims are now living as a minority in Europe, in Australasia, and in the States, in South America. So we are now more spread out across the world than we have ever been. Now, you could say there's good in that and there's bad in that. Whatever it is, that's what it is. That's the reality. You and I didn't make that choice, possibly. We were born here, I guess, so we didn't make that choice. Do we make a choice to stay? I guess we made a choice to stay. But anyway, we're past 8 p.m, mashallah. I thought it was going to be a quiet Sunday, but clearly not. Quite a busy Sunday, alhamdulillah. So same time, same place tomorrow, as we enter well into February. Again, as I say, please do share the handle with others. So whether it's a YouTube, whether it's Insta, whether it's Facebook or TikTok, please do share it with others, so that one is that they can benefit from today's recording, but also that they can join. Okay, my syncing has stopped. And also that they can join for future programs, inshallah. So jazakum khair again. All the best, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana. And alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.